Hey there, folks. Congratulations, we made it through another election in this great country of ours. Welcome back to the Horseshoe Theory. You know what it is. This is Bradley.
And this is AJ. So Bradley, well, it's an election, and so elections have to have winners and losers. So who won the election?
I'll tell you who won the election, and I gotta say, it was really interesting because, this person's been around in American politics. This has been around in American politics for more than 40, 50 years now, right? This has always been a struggler. This person's had to struggle so much being labeled as a lot. This has been had to struggle to be labeled a lot as what it's not. And, I just got to say, man, even though it looked close in a lot of places and ultimately it turned it around, congratulations to drugs for winning. I mean, I got to say, not only did they win the election, they won the whole. In my opinion, what last night was the mandate on? And we'll get into it more later, but the only damn mandate that we saw in this country? Ending the war on drugs. Because listen, folks, I mean, yeah, I know that I'm sure that by now you've seen the memes or seen the reactions to Oregon decriminalizing all drugs, which I personally think is excellent policy. Portugal did it in 2001. When you have 20 years of success on a policy, you no longer get to call it, like, scary. You know what I mean? But, I mean, for those of you in the Fargo-Moorhead area, you will be very interested to learn that, if you jump on the interstate and go south there, bud, I think it's in July of 2021 when it officially becomes legal to possess. But do your research, don't quote me on that. But South Dakota, by a margin of about 53-54%, legalized recreational marijuana. Now, it's also interesting, probably helped the recreational people quite a bit, was that they also legalized medical marijuana by a tally of about 69%, nice, in South Dakota. So, between the decriminalization, not to mention, if you need any other reason, other than the 4 other states to pass a recreational measure, and, 3 other states, and then also Ruby Red, Mississippi, passed medical marijuana. And then it kind of got lost in the, because they decriminalized everything in small amounts. But Oregon also, if I'm not mistaken, legalized and started setting up kind of at least in principle, psilocybin therapy treatment and legal psilocybin for that purpose. And then Washington, D.C. also decriminalized. I think that theirs was a little broader, but in practice it means mostly psilocybin. I think they decriminalized all, like, natural hallucinogens. But, no one's done peyote in 50 years. So pretty much that means shrooms. But yeah, so what you really saw across the country. And like I said, I would call the performed well in deep blue areas, the issue performed well in deep red areas. I mean, here's the thing. One of the most powerful senators in America, the senior senator from South Dakota, think about all the power that person has institutionally in the Senate, right? Because they can, I mean, as we've talked about on this show, AJ, the Senate does like to reward those small states disproportionately, right?
Right.
So think about what this does. Just for the record, that's John Thune. Senator John Thune, as well as their other one, that's how Senates work, now represents a legal state. Think about what this does for the United States. Think about what this does if you're a libertarian like me, for my favorite and probably second most forgotten amendment, the 10th Amendment. We actually, if there's ever been a mandate, if there's ever been a time where conservatives can say, okay, federally this isn't going to hurt me at the polls, then man, I think that we're going to see, and I'll tell you what, I have a gut feeling that one of the only things that we are going to see any movement on, because I'm predicting that the GOP keeps the Senate by the skin of their teeth. I think that they, especially because, as we'll discuss later, they're going into a runoff, blah, blah, blah. But, so I think that one of the only things that we're going to see a lot of traction on is ending the war on drugs. Because obviously it has, as Joe Biden showed us, not universal Democratic support, But like, if you walk into someone that identifies as a Democrat on the street, particularly if they're under 50, 55 years old, they're probably in favor of a more rehabilitative, at least, system, right? If you talk to a lot of Republicans these days, even old conservatives, hand to God, I've done it. You talk to old conservatives, so they tell you, you know what, it's not working and it's too damn expensive anyhow. At the very least, talking about keeping marijuana illegal, not to mention for things like medicinal use where it's still illegal in a lot of this country. So I think we might see a ton of overdue legislation regarding everything from marijuana. I hope including and up to psychedelic cure. I don't want to say cures. I'm not a doctor. Potential psychedelic treatments for things like psilocybin, for things like PTSD, anxiety, depression, a whole host of issues. Think about what this could do for America. Think about we could be looking, and I think a couple of places actually did pass. Did South Dakota too? I forget. I'll look it up. But the point being, expungement also passed with several of those legalization bills. So we also have an appetite for ending the wrongs, right? I mean, Donald Trump didn't do enough of it to actually matter, but even he made a very big deal off of freeing a cocaine dealer. Now, yeah, it's a cocaine dealer who's an old woman and who committed a crime like 20 plus years ago. But I don't want to say cocaine dealer, but committed in like some cocaine distribution ring, right? That's what she was sentenced on, at least. Imagine a president doing that. Hell, especially a Republican president 15 years ago and getting praise from his own party for doing so. So I think that we're definitely, it was a long, hard fight. The other side fought dirty, but congratulations, drugs. You won the war on drugs.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. And this is the point of the show. It's the horseshoe theory, right? Bradley's a libertarian. I'm a progressive. But it's clear that we agree that the war on drugs has been useless. Giant waste of taxpayer money. Giant waste of everybody's time. And it was ultimately fruitless at the end. To talk a bit more about what Bradley said regarding decriminalization of everything in Portugal, what actually happened is not only did crime go down, the drug-related crime, but also you saw overall usage went down for decriminalization, because at the end of the day, there are just rebels who like to do things because it's not allowed, right? So
yep.
You have to look at it in twofold, right? When people say marijuana is a gateway drug, they obviously don't understand why it is a gateway drug, right? It's not because, oh, my mind's never been messed up like this before. It's that you're going to a guy to buy marijuana, and that person probably has other stuff. So that's the way it's a gateway. If it's completely legal and you just go and buy it at the store and that's all you get, right? It's not any more of a gateway drug than alcohol. And in fact, it's safer. Funniest thing that I saw was Fox News was over in D.C., right? Oh, and we're recording this on the 8th of November, so Sunday. The election was called yesterday. So D.C. was celebrating, and the Fox News reporter was like, the smell of marijuana is pungent in the air, and maybe that's why we haven't seen any violence. Like... You could not make a better case for full set legalization of marijuana, right?
Especially right now.
If these types of tensions, if all those people were drunk in the street, like just hammered in the street, and you could imagine violence happening. Now, everybody getting really high? No. I mean, it just didn't, you just don't see it happening, right? You know, if you're walking through a dark alley and like you see homeless people like and they're like drinking or they're smoking weed, you're probably gonna feel safer when you're walking by and they're just like, yo, you got any food? Versus like on alcohol, they're trying to fight you, man. Like it's just and I'm gonna talk about how exactly the Democrats really messed this up. But as Bradley said, this is a bipartisan issue. It won everywhere. Okay. And it's completely sweeped. It's a clean sweep of pro-marijuana all across the country, right? And it's just mind-boggling to me that we still don't. That it's still a Schedule I drug. It's still classified as dangerous as heroin.
Ludicrous.
On the first day Joe Biden takes control. He needs to remove it as a Schedule 1. Absolutely. I don't know if by executive order he can fully decriminalize it, but that needs to go. And he ran on marijuana decriminalization, and he didn't go far enough. Because
Absolutely.
And I'm going to talk about this more once we get to the loser section, because I am absolutely furious at the Democratic Party for this. But you have to imagine that any presidential candidate that runs on marijuana legalization would have just potentially won the Electoral College by 400 electoral votes. And it's just mind-boggling to me, the softball that was missed by not just Trump, but Biden, missed by all the presidential candidates. At least there were a couple on the Democratic side that were full legalization and expungement, but apparently they aren't popular enough. Whatever. Anyways, I think we've talked enough about that winner, because that is obviously the big winner of this election, is that drugs have won the war on drugs. I mean, it's been how many elections in a row now? We continue to see marijuana become more accepted.
Well, and plus, one more thing. Folks, I know that this year has in and of itself felt like a whole decade. I get it more than anyone, believe me. But it was only about 8 years ago, AJ, me and you were speaking about it in high school, that the first state in this country legalized recreational marijuana. In 8 years, it's gone a dozen states, plus the District of Columbia, all the way to South Dakota. What the hell are we going to see by 2030?
I completely agree. And when New Jersey passed it, because they're such a populous state, 1 in 3 Americans have fully legal marijuana available to them. I mean, it's how can a Schedule 1 drug be legal for a third of the country population-wise, right? Like, that's just so crazy to me. And it's such a softball. It is the easiest thing ever, but this is the American government we're talking about. So we're maybe another 10 years from it being federally legal.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, hopefully it's less than that, but my God, man, it is. If you aren't noticing the winds turning, right? This is kind of the only thing that I think is comparable to how quickly the winds turned on this was the issue of gay marriage back in the early 2000s. You really saw the winds. They started, and then it really just like took off, right? So even like Obama, when he ran for Senate, he was like, he wasn't full for gay marriage equality. But then
one man, one woman.
Right, exactly. And then towards the end of his presidency, fully behind marriage equality. And that was just, he was a first-term senator when he became president, right? So that's in the span of 10 years, and this is comparable. These are 2 issues that have clearly taken the country by storm. And we're going to see we're going to see drugs continue to win elections. Would you say that, Bradley? Oh,
absolutely. Are you kidding me? Drugs are going to kick these spaced out politicians' asses. No doubt.
Absolutely. All right. So Bradley led with his winner. For our format today, we're going to kind of do a back and forth winners and losers, but we're going to do a snake version. If y'all play fantasy football, it's more of a snake version. So he said a winner, my turn to say a winner, and I'll say a loser after this. So the winner that I have from this election, and it's a big one, and we've talked about it a lot. My big winner, my big take is polarization. It really ran away with this election. We have never seen levels of polarization like this in at least 100 years. I mean, the 2016 map was almost exactly the same as the 2020 map. There were 2 or 3 state changes, right? Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan. And that's really it, right? Wisconsin, too. Those 5 states, which everybody knew would determine the election. Georgia was a sleeper. Arizona was a sleeper. But nothing changed. And in fact, with higher turnout, we're going to see almost the same amount of point margin for Biden. I personally thought he was going to win by like 6 or 7 points in the national popular vote. But he's going to finish after they start counting all the California ballots, so many California ballots. Probably going to win somewhere in the 4 to 5 range, and that's marginal improvement over Clinton. with some important demographic losses, at least according to the exit polls. Once again, exit polls are notoriously not correct, so take those with a grain of salt. We won't really know the full demographic shifts not until sometime next year, just because that's when the data starts to get processed and papers get released. So there's not really a good time for a good postmortem. I will be giving a postmortem shortly after this on some stuff, but it's a bit early. Got some takes, though. I've always got takes. And at the end of the day, polarization, the country just seems more and more polarized. 70 million people, more than any in history, for any election, voted for Donald Trump. It just so happened that Biden got 75 and counting million.
Mm-hmm. Which is, in and of itself, I mean, ridiculous, right? Just absolutely, who would have think that these two borderline 80-year-old men would have been able to get that kind of turnout?
I completely agree. And one thing that I kind of want to ask this rhetorically to you, Bradley, is, the idea of democracy is holding politicians accountable for failures, right? And by all accounts, except for, diehard GOP talking points, the coronavirus response has been a failure. Public health experts, you look globally, you look at our deaths per capita, that type of stuff. Has our method of holding politicians accountable and with this level of polarization, is it broken?
I mean, if I may interject for a second, are you implying that we ever held these SOBs accountable? I've read a lot of American history, but as it relates specifically to the coronavirus, I think that the broader issue, and everything's broken when it comes to how we handle politicians, right? But really, 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 it's like just such a failure of. It's such a societal failure. It's a failure to agree on facts. We're at a weird place right now.
Yeah,
we're at a weird place.
So I'm going to push back a little bit on the have we ever held politicians accountable. I would say that we have. Carter was a one-term president. He was held accountable. You can look at George W. Bush, the repudiation of the Republican Party in 2008. He was held accountable for those wartime decisions, right? You can look at H.W. Bush. He was held accountable for mostly election flubs. But, those different things. I guess you could say Trump lost, so the accountability is still there.
Well, I think... But I don't want to spoil anything. But on the issue of accountability, and there's definitely how do you put it? If you talk fantasy football, I'll talk football again. They were kind of Trump definitely ran an excellent series of special teams plays. You know what I mean? I was very surprised at how competitive he was. But really, I also think that there's a certain degree of pushback. I mean, we can, I'm sure that there's a variety of reasons. But do you know what the American people picked, really, fundamentally? And what the stock market reacted well to? Divided government. I think really, when we're talking about Trump, I mean, I think insofar as, even as the coronavirus was a concern, right? Because COVID was horrible. But I think that it was just Trump that ultimately made this election unwinnable for Trump.
Sure. But it was close. We don't need to say it was unwinnable as in impossible. It was very close. We're talking about, spread out over the 5 critical states. It's going to be less than 200,000 votes. So, once again, people, your vote matters. The listeners here, they live in Minnesota or North Dakota. Minnesota votes, kind of swingy. North Dakota vote not too much. But
North Dakota, vote at the local level, but don't be afraid to go third party. It's probably not going to be an issue.
I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
You're fine. If North Dakota is going blue, your vote's not going to matter anyhow, buddy.
But yeah, so that's what I saw as another winner is polarization, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, it doesn't get worse. But like you said, divided government could see it get worse. Who knows? So now it's my turn for a loser, and this is going to be I get to, as a progressive, I get to blame the Democratic Party. The big loser is the Democratic Party, the DNC, the Democratic establishment. They're probably going to blame progressives for making the election closer than it was with their rhetoric over the summer or whatever, and that's fine. That's fine. Progressives are used to always being blamed. It was the progressives' faults for voting for Jill Stein in 2016. It's always the progressives' faults. But the reason why I say it's the DNC that cost them is it's linked to our big winner of the election is drugs. But the DNC rejected marijuana legalization by 2/3.
Massively.
From putting it on the platform. I mean, the tone deafness, the absolute failure of a party to not sense the shifting winds and to not have a candidate running with full marijuana legalization. I mean, hear me out, Bradley. If Biden legalized, had ran on full marijuana legalization, didn't even talk about expunging records because that could be seen as politically risky. But if he had ran on full marijuana legalization, do you think he could have broke 400 electoral votes?
I don't know if he could have broke 400 electoral votes. I'll tell you this, though. I read polls are notoriously inaccurate, but I've read a number of polls that indicated that whereabouts 10% of people under the age of 25 plan to vote third party this election. And I'm willing to bet for a lot of those people under the age of 25, one of the biggest issues for them and their friend group is, in fact, marijuana legalization. So I don't know if he could have got to 4. I'll tell you this, though. We sure wouldn't have been waiting on Georgia and Pennsylvania if Biden had ran on. Like, we'd have called a lot of those a lot sooner, in my estimation.
Yeah, and, Biden's winning the national vote once again, but final count will probably be between 4 or 5 points, which is a slight improvement over Hillary Clinton in 2016, who won by like 3.2 points. But overall, running on full marijuana legalization and the Democratic establishment rejecting that, it just shows that this institution that we call the Democratic Party really is the most incompetent institution. And I'm talking, it is more incompetent than any branch of the government, whether it's the VA, whatever. To have this kind of election be so close, you could blame it on polarization. I would blame it on incompetence. The Democratic establishment did not want to do any sort of door-to-door knocking, and we saw that door-to-door knocking might have won the race.
It's always most effective.
Right, and people need face-to-face interaction, and phone calling, which is what the Democratic Party wanted to do, calling people doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. People, if you call them to talk about politics, one, nobody answers phone numbers that they don't know anymore. And if you do, you're probably the kind of person who answers polls. But
self-selection.
Yeah, and because they can hang up. But if you're at their door and you talk to them face-to-face about what are the issues that matter to you most? Oh, you care about the economy? Here's what the candidate is going to do about the economy. We want the economy to recover. And just overall, the Democratic Party, their economic message was, we are going to not be Trump. That's not an economic message. An economic message is talking about what you're going to do for the voters. And the DNC has been hearing this for years from the progressives. And they're going to continue to take the worst and wrong lessons from the election. So I'm fully looking forward to an absolute decimation of the Democratic Party in 2022. And I'm looking forward to potentially an even worse Republican candidate than Trump for progressive ideas in 2024. Potentially Trump again.
I don't think he'll run again. I think he'll get trumped.
I think it could be Trump again, Trump Jr. Trumpism is here to stay.
Yeah.
But that's my loser section, talking about the Democratic Party. And I'm going to say it again, the most incompetent institution in the country. by
And
any measurement.
can I just put something out for the listeners? I did some back of the envelope math here. I was a political science major, to take with a grain of salt. South Dakota legalized, let's call it 53% in favor of legalization. The Democrats voted against legalization, with 33% of those in present voting for it, roughly. That means that on average, when it comes to marijuana policy, South Dakota is on average 20% more progressive than the DNC infrastructure. If you're a progressive, I literally cannot think of a bigger fire alarm. Like, yo, y'all are behind South Dakota. Horrible. But, I think that there's been to try and pick one loser is in and of itself kind of interesting, right? But really, if I had a loser to pick, I'm going to have to go with, honestly, institutions. I think institutions as a whole were a big loser this whole year, but especially this election, right? Because, the only institution that really won was the Supreme Court, because if the Republicans keep 51, there ain't no stacking going on. But other than that, the Americans' faith in the CDC, down the toilet. Americans' faith in media, down the toilet. Americans' faith, rightfully so, in pollsters, right? Maybe you can give them a mulligan after 2016 because it was really weird and really new, you know what I mean? But how do you biff it that hard in 2020? Your methods, there wasn't a blue wave, there's a blue puddle. You know what I mean? Your methods clearly aren't working. And then at a more fundamental level, I think that COVID has really, really torn through, not only in a governing sense, but, we don't really have, Thanksgiving is coming up, and I know a lot of people listening right now, for the first time in many years, other than unless they moved or something, won't be able to do Thanksgiving. So even things like, society-wide institutions, I guess, are really, really... And the election, and as you mentioned, the polarization from your winner has only exacerbated that. And that's why I was very pleased as... And really, I think that it'll be remembered as one of those kind of turn down the heat moments, hopefully. But I was very pleased by Biden's election. Not election, although I gotta say, I'll take a split house. But yeah, his victory speech. I thought that it was very unifying and pacifying, and you could kind of feel, if not the temperature decrease, like it leveled out. It hasn't leveled out for a very long time. But, when half of the country, and I don't know the actual amounts, and I think that Trump is actually, if I could put it to be, it would be him post-election, because he is really, if there was any legal, and I don't think there is, I think he lost handily, and that's kind of that. But, Trump has just really kind of burned all of his, he's burning a lot of bridges with the way that he's reacting, right? Just claiming that he won and will do. It's not like there's like one state like it was in Florida, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, relatively clear refutation at the Electoral College and popular vote level. But yeah, and the DNC, also a loser. Another institution. I really think that, and hell, there's been issues and discussions about social media. What, if they have any, indeed, obligation to protect freedom of speech. So really, I think just our broader institutions, save maybe for the Supreme Court and Wall Street, just took a beating, especially on Election Day.
Yeah. If I could, I was going to do it for my next loser, but I might as well do it now. So yeah, polling, obviously. You mentioned an institution. We're talking about a miss in the same states as they missed last time by potentially even bigger margins. So 2016, their reasoning, and we won't know the reason why polling missed for right now, but the reason that polling missed in 2016 was they didn't weight by education, because education was shown to have such a strong party correlation, and that was not the case in the past. So they did it. They fixed what they said the problem was from 2016. It looked like they got it right in 2018. 2018, they got basically right on the money, right? They were predicting a blue wave. We got a blue wave in that midterm. However, this election, I mean, the best example that we have is in the Maine Senate race. Not Maine as in Main, but Maine is in the state, right? So we had Susan, yeah, add the E at the end. So we're talking about Susan Collins versus Sarah Gideon. And the polling average predicted Gideon by like 8 points. And Collins won by like 10 points. I mean, it's... If we're that is one of the biggest polling failures, I think, in recent memory. An 18-point miss for a Senate race. Now, hear me out. States are really hard to poll for Senate races. Most pollsters are national pollsters, not state pollsters. So potentially they're weighting algorithms, and it might not work for certain states versus it works for national votes, whatever. But that's still, a massive failure for polling. And when we're looking at all the other Senate races that are told to be close, or look at Texas, right? Texas polling average had Trump by like 1 to 2 points. Trump won the state by 6 points, right? But as usual, the Democrats went, oh my God, blue Texas is possible, and then failed. Classic.
Yep.
Saw it happening from a mile away. They've been trying to turn Texas blue for like 30 years now. Just win a statewide race once.
Yeah.
They haven't won a statewide race since 1992. Just win one. Okay, then we can talk about maybe they'll go blue in a presidential election. Okay, beat Ted Cruz, the one of the most hated senators in the country. Try to beat him, and then we can talk about blue presidential Texas. Just so many different states, large polling errors, and we're not going to know. It's going to require an entire autopsy, because 2 presidential elections in a row, just massive polling failures. The credibility of pollsters was already small within most circles, and their credibility is almost completely shredded.
Yeah, I mean, what credibility remains? Anyhow, this seems like a really good time to take a little break, so we'll be back in a little bit for those of you listening. Yeah, don't you dare touch that knob. Hey there, folks. Welcome back. I'm sure that you enjoyed our musical accompaniment, as well as the great advertisements and information we put in on here at 88.1 if you're listening on the radio. So, we were going back and forth, and, I have a winner as me personally, and I say this as one, and, it's been a long... Matter of fact, I don't know if you could say that I've ever really won an election as a libertarian. But if you're a libertarian or a small government guy, that was a very fulfilling election for you. As we talked about earlier, you already have the legalization across several states and all that stuff. I believe that California, and I mean across, maybe it wasn't in California. I know that they passed something, and in a lot of states, you saw people vote down higher gas taxes and higher taxes in general. They handed, and Joe Jorgensen didn't do too well there. Still happy I got that bottle of bourbon signed by her. But if you look at the actual, race, right? A Biden presidency with a GOP-led Senate, that's like the libertarian's dream. Because, you're not going to court pack, and you're not going to be able to push one agenda or the other. And from a containing government perspective, that's pretty all right. Not to mention, for what it's worth, I know that not every small L libertarian really even thinks the big L Libertarian Party is worth a damn. But interestingly enough, the Libertarian Party did also win its first member in a state house in 18 years in Wyoming. So if you're a small government kind of guy, we're not going to see a Green New Deal. We're not going to see court packing. If you're the kind of guy that I am, where, everyone hates libertarians for different reasons, is kind of what I feel like it's like. And we're just like, man. But, I mean, I got to be honest. Even though the Trump presidency was chaotic and weird, I don't think that I necessarily hate having a more conservative majority on the Supreme Court, especially if we have, as we have a Biden presidency. So, hey, I think that really what we're looking from a government perspective is a lot of gridlock and a lot of more doing things locally and at the state level. And so, I got to say, I think that if you're a government that governs best, governs least, the totality of the circumstances for you is, man, what a solid outcome. What a solid and unexpected outcome. Because just giving Trump the presidency back and then assuming that he could have, well, if he would have won the presidency, I imagine the GOP would have kept the Senate, right? Not necessarily ideal. The Democrats winning the House and Senate and White House, certainly not ideal. But man, split like that, mwah, mwah, beautiful.
Yeah, if you're a fan of gridlock and nothing happening for the next definitely 4 years, then yeah, this was a great outcome, and I would completely agree that gridlock's a big winner out of this. I don't know about the libertarian stuff. There was a actual tax hike that was passed in Oregon, though. I don't know if you saw this.
There was.
Yeah, so there was a tax hike that was passed in Oregon by ballot, and it was a tax hike, or was it? Yes, it was Oregon, because they have state income tax but no sales tax. So they increased their income tax on earners on, if you're in the highest earning bracket over $250,000. They added a 3.5% income tax, and that's going to be used for education. And that passed by pretty big majority in Oregon. But, Oregon's pretty big liberal bastion of the West. So take that as you will. That's definitely not reflective of the country as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a libertarian, while they did do that, that was also at the same time that they decriminalized literally everything. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that it was, I'll say this. My only real hope as a libertarian was that Joe Jorgensen would draw just enough votes to make certain issues relevant enough for the big parties tacked on, right? War, drugs, whatever. But man, did I expect all of this? One of the highlights of 2020, baby.
Yeah. I'm glad something went right for you. Because my winner, and it's kind of funny that you said libertarian policies won, because I would also say progressive policies won. So that's pretty funny. I like this, that we both said that our policies won out of this election. It just kind of goes to show that, depending on what you're looking at, you can take what you want out of this election. And that's why I fully anticipate Democrats to take the wrong lesson from this election. But, so Biden lost Florida, right? But also Florida increased their minimum wage to $15. So how exactly do we reconcile that? If you're me as a progressive, how exactly do you reconcile that a progressive policy such as increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour passed in a state that Biden lost by not so close of a margin? It was 2 or 3 points that he lost to Trump. In the grand scheme of things, you can consider that close. I wouldn't consider that close because it was he lost ground that Hillary had in 2016. But for me, how exactly do you consolidate that? I talked about the tax increase that passed on the wealthy to pay for education. Minimum wage passed. Most people running in their, House races, if they were for Medicare for all, they won their race. people
I
that
think that's a selection bias. I wouldn't buy that one personally.
So personally, I buy the story that, those people that supported Medicare for all are already in really blue districts. So it really didn't. So I buy that story a little bit. But at the same time, marijuana legalization, it's a libertarian and a progressive thing. And to me, it just seems like pretty easy thing to take is that there are certain progressive economic populist policies are popular. Increasing taxes on the wealthy is popular. Raising the minimum wage is popular. It passes by ballot referendum in various states. I mean, in Florida, man, like a $15 minimum wage passing in Florida, that's crazy. And it just goes to show that the Democrats running on not economics, when everybody in politics says this consistently, it's the economy, stupid, right? And the Democratic Party went, no, let's talk about healthcare and let's talk about the coronavirus. When clearly, that matters to a lot of voters, but not to all, and you need an economic message.
Mm-hmm. Clearly. And, just because it's fun. I will also add another wrinkle in there. Colorado actually decreased, I believe it was the income tax by referendum. Prop 116 will permanently lower the state income tax from 4.63 to 4.55%. So there's definitely a lot. And on the minimum wage issue, there's a saying in libertarian circles, and it's the conservatives or just progressives driving the speed limit. And I mean, I think the issue with Trumpism for the Republican Party, I'm going to throw in a big loser here. And it's a surprising loser because they did phenomenally well. I think that no one in America was happier with the outcome of the election than Mitch McConnell. Because all that progressive, I mean, granted, like I mentioned earlier briefly, it looks like we might be heading to a runoff in one, if not two, Georgia Senate races. So that would be the deciding factor. But
right, a quick question for you: over under or under $1 billion total spent in the state for those two Senate seats?
Over, especially if it's right? Two. Especially if it's two seats. I mean, one seat I could see topping out at $600-700 million alone. But if this is the game, right? Yeah, because if the Republicans keep the Senate, goodbye court packing, goodbye Green New Deal. And granted, I mean, you could argue even if they keep a 50-person majority, that in and of itself is a win because they can kind of at least box them in a little bit.
Yep, court packing won't happen in a 50-court Democratic hold. However, certain other policies like Joe Biden's Green New Deal Light, that stuff could pass with a 50 Democrat majority. But court packing wouldn't happen. There's no way Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, like those are very conservative Democrats. Yeah, absolutely. They would get slaughtered back home if they went and did something like court packing. Right, especially Manchin. I mean, just like at this point, like when we're talking about having a majority, obviously Manchin, it would be nice to not have McConnell in charge of the Senate because he has this wonderful thing where he's proud of creating, a policy graveyard where just whatever passes in the House, he just doesn't even bring it to the floor. It just dies, right? Where so obviously dreams go to die. Right. Commie dreams. Okay. I'll let that slide. But if Schumer is allowed to bring those to the floor, obviously if they're politically advantageous and can put Republicans in difficult situations, that's a lot better than letting McConnell have that power. I would argue that if it's whether it's 50 Democrats or 49 Democrats, nothing dramatic's going to change, man. Democrats talking about court packing, you would need 57 Democrats in the Senate. Filibuster reform, not going to happen with 50 Democrats. I mean, all of those really big eye in the sky policies that people that, conservatives, libertarians, whoever were scared about. None of that's going to happen, even if Democrats hold the Senate.
Excellent. But
Yeah.
and what's really interesting on Georgia too? You're talking about potentially a 2-seat runoff, right? So like, my God, honestly, I think that we could see it closer to 1.5 billion than $1 billion. And honestly, I might take the over on that too.
So I have a opinion on that. Surprisingly, I'm on this podcast. So my thought is, if it's over 1.5 billion, that will be because Trump does some sort of shenanigans in the next 2 months. I ultimately think that a lot of energy from the left is dissipating just right now. A lot of brunch liberals, as we progressives like to call them, where they're just liberals. They go and get excited during a presidential election, go and vote, and then they return to brunch happy that they did something. So those brunch liberals, already the energy is dissipating. But if Trump does some sort of shenanigans, trying to do some sort of faithless electors thing, trying to have GOP controlled states usurp the will of the voters or something like that, that stuff's still in play. I don't think it's very likely. Absolutely, money's going to be spent in the Senate, but I really don't expect above 1.5 billion. It's going to be above 1 billion. But 1.5 billion means that Trump did something to piss off the liberals again. That's my opinion on the over-under for money.
That very well could be. Although it looks like, God, I ran up in the morning and just chugged some water and caffeine and came on this podcast and or radio show, depending on your preferred method. But yeah, it looks like... I say something kind of weird. I think it's very good for democracy and very good for our republic right at this second, but Donald Trump took this opportunity to golf. I really think that's symbolic, because what did he do after the election? He fired off some stuff, and then he went to play some golf, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that him playing golf is like, how do you say, it's I just don't think that that's what someone who wants to fight every centimeter and inch and give it everything he's got does in the immediate aftermath of an election like that. So I think that we're going to see a lot of bluster from Trump, and he might litigate, but hell, at a certain point, it's going to be fairly obvious, and I don't think that he'd have any type of Republican support if he did that. And furthermore, hell, he did kind of run for, like, most of his time in the spotlight campaigning against the deep state, right?
Yeah.
And
he declared his run for office, like, the day after he took office. He declared his run for 2020, which most presidents don't do that.
Yeah, but do you really think that the, like, CIA and that whatever is just going to kind of let a silent coup happen? No, and I think he knows that. Trump
okay. So the CIA under Trump isn't even competent enough to perform a coup in Bolivia. So, like, when we're talking about pure incompetence, man, every president is able to successfully coup a Latin American country, but not this one.
Wouldn't it be funny if in the final months he went with the Reagan strategy and took over Grenada again? Very big.
I was so funny, the establishment Democrats, where they were like appalled, and they were like, we tried to stage some sort of coup and it failed, and it was like, so what are you mad about, the fact that we did a coup or the fact that it failed? Like, because let me tell you, if you're someone who likes history, it's par for the course. So that's a good pivot into one of my losers from this election, and that's meme makers. I think that meme makers are going to have some hard times moving forward, because you could make great memes based off of the incompetence of this administration, and you could say that I'm tone deaf or that I don't know what I'm talking about or anything, but Rudy Giuliani yesterday held a speech at Four Seasons Landscaping Company, and and you could not like summarize it better than Trump tweeting it, because he thought it was at the Four Seasons, the hotel in Philadelphia, but it was actually at Four Seasons Landscaping Company. And everybody was really confused. And then they go to this landscaping company. It's between a crematorium and a dildo store. and they set up this like rinky-dink little like backdrop and everything. And Rudy Giuliani didn't even know that the election was called for Biden during the press conference.
Really?
You know yeah. They were like, hey, did you know that Trump lost? And he's like, oh, he lost? Who called it? And they're like, all of them. And he's like, oh my God, all the networks. Oh, he like literally said that these ballots were coming from Mars. I mean, the memes are going to be, the political memes, they're going to die down a little bit. We're not going to get great moments like when Clemson came to visit the White House and Trump forgot, and then they got McDonald's and they fed them McDonald's. We're never going to, I don't. Hopefully, we get some moments like that, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm gonna miss those type of moments.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I think that's the only thing that 2020 really had going for it in hindsight was the memes. This is going to be an anthropologist's dream someday.
Yeah,
going through old group chats.
Here's another one. Kofefe. We're never going to get a Kofefe moment where he said Kofefe wasn't a typo and that. Y'all need to figure out what Kofefe meant in his tweet. Joe Biden doesn't do his tweets. He thinks that we all communicate through the radio still the most. Which, by the way, thank you for listening to this to the radio. But Joe Biden thought that families gathered around the radio. So that's not what I'm talking about here. Listening to the radio in your car or at work, love it. Thank you for listening to the show.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not the primary, although I'll tell you what, I mean, are we forgetting that not too long ago Joe Biden went to a damn campaign rally in person as a politician and proceeded to play Despacito on his cell phone speaker? Like, I have hope. I have a glimmer of hope.
I'm sure we're going to get some moments, but I think we're going to be much more in the W. Bush territory of memes or mess ups. Joe Biden might say like an Iraqistan type moment, or where he says there's 4 countries in the axis of evil, but only lists 3, or a Rick Perry type moment where he forgets what I remove. I think we'll get those kind of moments, but. I don't think that we're going to get anything as picturesque as like Clemson football players eating McDonald's at the White House.
Yeah, for those of you listening, you'll be interested to note that NDSU football players also got McDonald's and they visited the White House. So, equality, I guess. I don't really know. I gotta say, man, just spitballing here, but do you know who a real, like, potentially the biggest side winner might be? If they still got the juice. I don't know if they got the juice. I hope they got the juice.
Are you talking about Trump 2024?
No. Not Trump 2024. My personal prediction is that he goes back to running a reality show where he can always be right again.
Do you think he's going to do a media company?
Maybe. I think if Trump runs, I don't know if he even gets in the Republican nomination per se, depending on how the party changes. I could see him doing a third-party thing like Teddy Roosevelt did.
Oh, Boom Moose Party. What a throwback.
The MAGA party.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I could so imagine
with a lion.
that.
Like a lion as its symbol.
Oh, yeah. Or would he do an eagle or something? It's MAGA. It would probably be an eagle.
Yeah. And it would look oddly fascist and be like, hey, it's a great symbol.
Yeah, it would look a little bit like the Nazi eagles or something.
Yeah.
And everyone would be like, that's a little too close, it's a little too on the nose, but they'll all say, oh, we didn't know.
Yeah. But No. And, I'm sure that me and you remember AJ because, The Onion was always like the treasure trove of just easy anecdotes. And I love The Onion. And I hope they never stop making content. But for those of you that might be a little bit, if I'm talking to any Gen Zers right now, I just want to say, go back and look up some Onion articles from 2009, 2015-ish. No, 2015-ish. And just search Joe Biden. Because, I don't know if they've been putting this heat on in the election, but man, AJ, do you remember Joe Biden as portrayed by The Onion circa 2008 to 2015?
Yeah, he was hilarious.
He was awesome. He mentioned in the last piece that they really did on him, he said that something going, the articles around him going on tour and quote-unquote leaving a pound of high grade for the wife so that she has something to start off of in the attic. Just amazing articles. There was one where he hooked up a quote-unquote sweet summer gig installing above-ground swimming pools, and the way they wrote these was just I could actually kind of see Biden doing that in another life if he didn't get into politics, you know what I mean? Just so on the nose. Oh my God, if I can get any present to start off 2021 other than a COVID vaccine or cure or wide acceptance of base, even if they're wrong, I would like that if we could all try the same set of hypotheses at the same time as a nation, you know what I mean? Relatively speaking on the COVID thing. But, man, wouldn't it be just awesome if The Onion came out with an article on the eve of the election, Joe Biden nervously pacing or putting together a 3-note card presentation for inauguration pitch or something like that. I'd be so happy.
Yeah. And, I agree that The Onion is going to come out on top. The hard times, they're going to come out on top of this because political memes, they're not going to be as in your face anymore. Unless of course Biden makes a mess up, but it's going to be much more nuanced. So I could see The Onion and the hard times really making a good comeback. I got another winner, and I got to say, thus far, I'm happy, but also a little sad, and I'll explain why I'm a little sad about this good thing. But there was no real big instability thus far, and thank you all for doing that and not creating political violence. Everybody prepared for the worst, but I think what helped was the president was off golfing during the initial call. I really do think that helped. And, we could see some little things come in and out, but if there wasn't a lot of political violence last night being Saturday night, after the media called it, we're probably not going to see any major instability. So I think that's a great thing. Happy we made it through this election. I personally thought the worst, but we're good for this. And the reason why I'm sad about this is because my friend made a bet because he was so confident that there wouldn't be civil unrest. He said that if there was major civil unrest, he would get circumcised. And so all of us, because we're in a group chat with him, I saved the picture and I just kept posting it every couple of days to remind him that this is on the line. And I was really hoping, it's just one target being burned in some city or something that we could classify as major civil unrest, just to get that little, just really. I know it's really messed up, y'all, and I understand it, but personally, I thought it was hilarious.
Well, I guess your friend was the really big winner for the night. And I know that we've gone back on a few winners, but after watching Joe Biden's acceptance speech, what I thought was a substantial winner? Complete sentences. Complete sentences won.
Wasn't it great? Wasn't it great to hear something? And yes, he did have some flubs on some words.
Well, the man does have a stutter. I mean,
right. And it's definitely more apparent now than in his previous speeches, like in 2008. His stutter wasn't as noticeable, but now the stutter is a bit more back, which makes sense. He was out of public life for a while.
Yeah.
But it's very Yeah, I'm glad I could actually like form coherent sentences, and maybe it was just a teleprompter speech or something. But it's always nice to have coherent sentences.
It really was. I think that one person put it best on like Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It's sorry that I can't quote you if you ever find out that I quoted you, whoever you were, but hey, ain't that life? But they said something like, it's nice that I'll be able to have policy disagreements and not also have policy disagreements and personally hate the guy and have to deal with like stoking like political violence all the time and not being an overt fascist. And, it's,
Hey,
I guess,
I'm not going to rule that out yet.
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, Kamala, the former prosecuting attorney who, as Tulsi Gabbard brought up, not only locked a bunch of people up for nonviolent crimes, but may have left a man on death row without looking at evidence to overturn his conviction. Kamala scares me. Biden, I think, I don't know. And I know that this ain't going to happen, but I have a really awesome dream where, like, Biden turns into late President Calvin Coolidge and just kind of eats his oatmeal and signs some bills, vetoes a couple things, and then goes to bed by 5, 6 o'clock at night. I'd be cool with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to rule that out. That's why his cabinet's really important to me as a progressive. The only thing is that, if the GOP control the Senate, this cabinet is going to be full of moderates. At the top of the list for the Secretary of the Department of Commerce is Megan Whitlock, whatever. Well, anyways, if you know who she is the CEO of Quibi. She used to be one of the founders of Quibi, which is a huge success. If you don't know what Quibi is, then that's because it's such a huge success. It's going to be studied as a business case, as one of the preeminent failures of modern times. And, she could be potentially the Secretary of Commerce. Because losers, like people that can't found a successful company, should honestly be in charge of companies that are successful.
Yeah. Speaking of that, moderates, especially if the GOP keeps the Senate, for those of you in the immediate Fargo-Moorhead area, I know that I think it was 18. Yeah, it was 18. Seems so long ago already. But you might remember Miss Heidi Heidkamp, who, it's kind of funny because Western Minnesota went red as hell on Senator Heidkamp, I guess I should say, once said that if she had Western Minnesota in her district, she'd be in office for life. But she's been floated as a possible pick for the Department of Agriculture. So, I mean, man, that is if this was a lunch buffet, it would be like plain unspicy foods. You know what I mean? This is all going to be very easy to digest, and this is going to be I know that she didn't always vote this way, but if you're picking a Democrat from North Dakota, I think that's pretty that in and of itself has to be such a win for Republicans, right? That in and of itself.
Yep, you say it's easy to go down for the moderates, which I totally buy. And if we continued this analogy as a progressive, I hate bland food. And it's really hard for me to eat bland food. And I hate eating it. So it's going to really suck for the next couple years for me, which is fine. That's the way it is. I personally think it's going to be such a failure for the next 4 years. We will see a potential increase in fascism and authoritarianism, because what I think is the roots of those issues is that people are tired of the government not working. And having a government that doesn't work will contribute to people's desire to just have a government that does something to solve the problems. For instance, coronavirus stimulus. Are we going to get another one? Maybe, maybe not. I could see Mitch McConnell. He's got an interesting play moving forward, because he can either try to pass stimulus during the lame duck session, so that way Biden can't claim a victory on any coronavirus stimulus, or he waits until Biden is in office and then makes Biden spend all of his time and political capital on passing that stimulus. I think it's an interesting play for McConnell, Pelosi, and I don't know if Trump's going to be even involved in the lame duck. He might just go to a private island or something. But
yep, there you go, Pence. Have fun.
Right, exactly. But that's an interesting play, I think, that we've got in the lame duck session, not just the cabinet talk, but there is still stimulus. McConnell said Friday, I believe, that he wants to pass coronavirus stimulus before the end of the year. So
really?
So that to me signals that McConnell is making a political play to where Biden can't even claim that he got any stimulus passed on his watch, which I think is a good political play if you're wanting to absolutely decimate the Democratic Party in 2022, which is what I fully expect.
Yeah, well, the Democrats are looking real clumsy heading into 22. I gotta say that much. But, I gotta say, though, I think that, and, stimuluses are very, they're not as controversial this go around because it's like it's a once-in-a-century pandemic and a bunch of stuff got shut down by force, you know what I mean? So it's a little more measured in this debate. But, man, wouldn't it be... I hope that McConnell does it if he's going to do it sooner rather than later. Because if he waits until... if we're having this discussion in February or March, right, we might already have, like, a cure and a vaccine or something out there. So it might be a little... You know what I mean? I guess insofar as it has a policy
too
advantage.
little, too late.
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of the, and like I said, I'm usually not a government giving money to people guy. I don't like tax credits. Typically don't like things like stimuluses. But if the government kind of makes it illegal to work for a long while, like they more or less like they did with me, and when I was a server back in North Dakota, that's not fair. But that being said, though. I think that McConnell has been preparing his whole political life for this. You know what I mean? Because one more football analogy and then I'll stop. One more little football analogy. So we got a lot of fans of the North Dakota State Bison listening. Mitch McConnell is like the king of ball control, right? He might not have the most explosive offense. He might not have any game-shattering defense. But like North Dakota State, Mitch McConnell will grind the clock out. He's arguably the best one at doing that ever in our history. So, Once again, I think that Mitch McConnell is having I think that he's having a party in his shell right now.
Well, I totally agree with that. McConnell still being in power means pretty much everything is dead. And the only stuff that's going to go through are smaller bipartisan things that pass under the radar. Mm-hmm. In his mind, he will not want to have a single legislative accomplishment for Biden to campaign on in 2022. And then the GOP will run the table. And then nothing will happen for another 2 years. So if McConnell holds it, and even a 50 Democrat advantage in the Senate, I think very few things will pass, but they will probably get one big legislative accomplishment. I think nothing will happen because right now we're already hearing about deficit hawks, fiscal responsibility Republicans.
Or where were they?
Yeah, which if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this show. Those arguments are completely in bad faith because they passed massive tax cuts that weren't paid for, and then they started spending during coronavirus. So, once again, don't believe anybody who says there's a deficit hawk, and that's the reason why they're worried.
Hey. Justin Amash, the only libertarian in Congress.
He retired. He's an open seat. He lost. He dropped out.
But we had there was at least one, but yeah, other than that, I mean, even some really solid former fiscal hawks really sold out hard. It'll be interesting to see. I want to know what Rand Paul says if Trump just goes away, right? Does he come out like, yeah, you know, I thought he was a jerk, but I was trying to get my vision for small government passed? Or does he just kind of stay this new alt-lighty Rand Paul, you know?
Yeah, maybe. The deficit hawks, the most apparent person of deficit hawks was Paul Ryan, who became Speaker of the House and oversaw the biggest deficit during peacetime we've ever seen. So, like I said, as a progressive, and that's probably what's tinting my lens, but just evidence over the past 40 years of Republican politics is deficit hawks when Democrats are in office and blow up the deficit when they're in office.
Yep. Democrats do the same thing, but with countries.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad we can all just go back to disagreeing about tax levels and whatever, and not argue about like our Muslims, should they be on a list where we have to. Hopefully we don't have any more ideas like that.
Yeah, hopefully at least not for another half a decade or so. Give America some time to regain its inertia, people.
Something. I mean, it was pretty funny. You saw like fireworks were being lit off in London, and like Paris rang the bells, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like the whole world was unified. I'm sure Russia is sad, but
yeah, various. You know what I'll say though? You want to know what? My buddy Raheem put this out on Facebook. You know the best part about being an American? Best part? Every person in every damn country, except for a handful of very rural tribes and people, certainly knew that there was an election happening in the United States. And a lot of them felt that they had a very, you don't let off celebrates over an election victory and across the world if it's not big, right? Important.
Right.
We don't even care who's in charge over there. Half of us don't even know when all you Europeans and Australians have elections. It doesn't matter. That's how you know we've got it, man. That's how you know that despite like the chaos of the 2010s and all that stuff, we're still maybe just slightly, but we're still the hegemonic power. You know what I mean? Like,
hey, like it's a good thing. I think that the rest of the world looks at us like we look at Florida.
But still, here's the thing, though, right? Like, there's other countries like that, like, arguably. I mean, if you're talking populism, there's, like, Brazil and Hungary. If you're talking we just do weird stuff to do weird stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of countries that have done a lot of weirder things, right?
Yeah.
But, man, it's just, I don't know. I guess that, like, what's disturbing to me, I guess, and in a weird way, it makes me very satisfied as an American that a big deal to us is also a big deal to them. Because if they're looking at the most hotly contested presidential race, I mean, the turnout numbers were the highest since, like, 1900, I think. I mean, going on a century this race was.
Right, and their primary form of voting at that time was mail.
Yeah. But if you're, what's the word I'm going for? If we're ever at that situation and Europe doesn't care, then I'm worried. So I guess a late winner is that, man, America, we are still it.
Yeah, let's go topple Latin American democracy. Woo!
Hey, as long as Biden can get it done by 5 p.m., he's got a nap scheduled. All right. I think that was I think we're going the same way with this right now. So, all right, folks, that has been the Horseshoe Theory. This has been a crazy time. Congratulations, America. Everyone took a breath, had a pint when we needed to have a pint, and everything looks like, at the very least, it's simmering down. So, on a much more, hopefully uneventful final 2 months of 2020, this has been the Horseshoe Theory. I am the Libertarian-in-Chief, Bradley Foster.
And I'm AJ, and I'm your sad progressive.
All right. Well, You heard it from the sad progressive himself. We will see y'all next week. You have a good one now.